Mom, Dad, I'm not throwing shade, but the whole New Year's resolution thing, kind of slipping, no offense. Anyway, my best friend Jenny's dad, crushing it. He uses Blue Apron. He says he ordered one-pan assemble and bake meals and these things called meal kits. They're all super easy to make. He keeps yelling, protein and fiber, baby. Also, the food, we tried it. So good. So maybe check it out or whatever. Blue Apron. Get 50% off your first 2 orders plus free shipping with code LISTEN50. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Shop the Sherwin-Williams Winter Sale and get 30% off paints and stains January 9th through the 19th. Whether you're refreshing your interior or exterior, we've got the colors to bring your vision to life. And with delivery, getting everything to your door is easier than ever. Shop online or visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details. Delivery available on qualifying orders.
I was reflecting on the fact that it was the 22nd or 21st anniversary of my first trip to Old Trafford on New Year's Day, and it's fair to say that the loss against Tottenham was less disastrous than the loss against the London club that we played on that particular day, because at least Tottenham didn't beat us 4-1.
Yes, very true, but still a 4th home loss of the season. No side has won the Premier League having lost 4 home games. So there you go. We're going to win the Premier League, obviously, since Moyes is breaking records left, right and centre at the moment.
Yeah, not the good kind, right? I guess let's look back at the game against Norwich. Now, you saw the first half of the Tottenham game, I saw the second half of the Norwich game, so we're going to help each other here. What was the first half of the Norwich game like?
Abysmal. In fact, the whole 90 minutes of the Norwich game was abysmal. United were ponderous in midfield, slow in the break, seemed to create no good chances. Well, you know, the occasional good chance. It was one of those really frustrating Manchester United performances. I mean, United actually had more of the ball, which anecdotally, just thinking about it, didn't feel like it was the case against Norwich, but did have more of the ball, but created very few chances with it. Very, very few. And Norwich were, you've got to say, unlucky because although they had less possession than United, they managed to create a lot of chances. And had it not been for the poor quality of finishing, then they might well have won that game.
So, apart from sort of fatigue and injuries, what did you put down the ponderousness of United to?
What would I put it down to? The Christmas spirit, maybe? I mean, had they drunk a little bit too much over the Christmas period? I don't know. Honestly, seriously, it was just another ponderous performance from United. We've seen so many of them this season. So, this year, in fact, 100% record of poor performances this year. But this season, just not great and extremely lucky for the goal. I mean, the ball was bouncing all over the place before Welbeck scored, but a fine finish. And I mean, the man can't stop scoring at the moment. He's becoming the striker you believe him to be.
Yeah, absolutely. It was lucky, but he definitely made his own luck with some fantastic pressing. He'll do that, will Danny? It was interesting because I kind of missed almost all of that game. I just walked in the door and Danny Welbeck scored. I was like, oh, this is brilliant. If only football was always like that. Shinji Kagawa coming in for an awful lot of stick from United fans. What do we think of that? Was he as bad as everyone's saying in that game?
The problem he's having at the moment is he's really struggling to influence games, and given that we all ask for him to be playing in a more central position, when he does, he's got to be successful with it, and he's not been, and it's really hard to say he's having the kind of impact we'd like to. We've defended him a lot on this show, haven't we? We've said that he's played out of position, that he can't get the ball enough when he's in that kind of left-wing position, especially when he's got those defensive responsibilities that he doesn't always have at, say, international level. We can complain about him not being used in the right way. Certainly he doesn't get enough of the ball, given that his movement is one of his better traits, so it's not the fact that he's not getting into the right positions. He's not influencing the game enough at the moment, So it is true, United aren't playing through him. We're not using him as a playmaker, but this team doesn't play like this. United under David Moyes are a lot more direct, and so maybe that's not playing into Kagawa's strengths, but at the same time he's not influencing the game in the way we'd like to. Perhaps if he was, he would find himself getting the ball more often, And true, United do play down the wings far more often than would have been the case, say, at Dortmund, where, especially in the the break, on the transition. They played through him, and it's just not happening for him at the moment, which is a real shame because we want him to be successful. And if he's not successful in this period, you've got to say that he's probably likely to leave next summer. I mean, I can't see a player of Kagawa's quality really wanting to sit around on United's bench.
No, and I think a lot of the people that have written him off, I think that's very unfair, and I don't generally like sentences that say if Twitter was around when, but I'm sure that Twitter would have had strong thoughts about Juan Sebastian Veron. I mean, I think it's pretty self-evident with Kagawa that it's not about quality. And one of the things is it's got to be very difficult for professional sports people to flit in and out of the team and not always be selected and then be sort of demanded that they perform at a high level when they are selected, you know.
One other thing I'd say is that Norwich, they worked extremely hard. And they managed to close United down in midfield areas. And after the game, Chris Hughton said that they were magnificent. And, that sounds like a bit of a Brentism, doesn't it, given that they lost the game. But I thought they played really well. It's hard not to admit that Norwich had put in a really good effort against United in that game, both in terms of the work rate and their quality when they had the ball, given that this is a side that has been struggling of late. Right? They didn't look like a side devoid of confidence. Although, having said that, after United scored, it didn't look like United were about to concede either.
No, but just watching match today highlights, it certainly looked like Norwich had more than their fair share of chances to make United pay, and they didn't succeed in doing that, unlike Tottenham Hotspur, who've beaten us at home for the second year in a row. This is a record Moyes couldn't break himself because Fergie decided to let him off that one by losing last season. Slightly less forgivable this time round, given the nature of the injuries and stuff that we had in the side against Spurs that game last year, but this time round just absolutely abject defending. Moyes saying in his post-match interview we didn't deserve to be behind at any point, and I just really got my goat, that did, when he said that, because you can say we deserved a point out of that game, you could even stretch it and say we deserved to win that game, but what you cannot say is that we didn't deserve to be behind at any point, because you defend like that, you deserve to be behind.
Well, quite. Football is in the details. What did he mean by that? Did he mean because United had 2/3 of the possession? Which is true, United did have 2/3 of the possession and created quite a lot of chances as well with it. So if you're going to look at it like that, then I suppose so. And in fact, United had a very strong start and a strong end to that game. It started pretty brightly, and after the United goal was scored, really pushed hard to get an equaliser, although I'd have to say a lot of that was hit and hope. So, yeah, sure, strong beginning, strong end, a lot of possession. But in truth, if you make mistakes, you are going to lose games. And that's what United are doing. And, some pretty basic goals scored by Spurs. But look, one thing you want to say about Tottenham is they got rewarded for their bravery. Came and played a 4-4-2 at Old Trafford with Eriksen and Dembele in the centre of midfield. Brave decision to start with. Adebayor and Soldado, you might say they're quite similar as players starting up front. A whole bunch of attacking players in there, Lennon on the right-hand side as well. Danny Rose at left-back, who's basically a winger, really. So they got rewarded for coming to Old Trafford and believing that they were going to win. And you can't argue with that, right?
No, absolutely. And, nice for Welbeck to get another goal, but even though there was a lot of endeavour, there were a lot of kind of missed chances, almost nearly moments. I think the referee had a poor game. That was my take on it. I'm not an expert on refereeing by any stretch of the imagination, but there were a lot of decisions which looked pretty crazy to me. I mean, Moyes was absolutely fuming about the penalty decision on Ashley Young, but I don't think you can fume about penalty decisions on Ashley Young, because if he's not given ones he's entitled to get, well, you just knock that off the ones he's got that he wasn't entitled to get, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, and what Moyes said about that one was, which was, I thought, the most telling bit, if that was in another area of the pitch, you would get the decision for the follow-through. But I have to say, whenever a striker shoots, or in this case knocks the ball past the keeper, and the follow-through takes the man, it's never given, because effectively the player's no longer in control of the ball. I don't actually think Young was in control of the ball. You can say Webb had a poor game, and I think in many respects he did, but that one's still debatable for me. I don't think that was really obvious as a definite penalty. And in any case, most of United's undoing was United's fault, right? What we're talking about here, there could have been a penalty, maybe we'd have got back into the game. Yeah, maybe. And maybe not. Ifs and maybes and coulda, shoulda, isn't that for teams that are kind of average and, luck is not always against you? Which appears to be the excuse at the moment, and, too often. And it's not that United are being unlucky, it's just United aren't being very good.
No, I mean, we beat Hull and Norwich and we're probably quite lucky to win both of those games. It could have easily broken the other way, couldn't it, both those games? I think if we reflect on the Christmas period as a whole, we've got a lot of points out of this period. There's a little glimpse of hope in the game against West Ham where we actually looked really efficient and pretty good. But that was the last time we played well, and that was 1, 2, 3. That was 3 whole games since then, and we haven't played well in any of them. And the great David Moyes Manchester United experiment is going pretty disastrously, as here we are in January, 7th in the table, somewhat dispirited looking bunch of players.
Yeah, well, the worst first half of the season since 1960-something, wasn't it? So, look, the big problem at United really haven't performed to any level against the better sides. The Arsenal game, but you'd have to say, if you were being honest about that one, that we caught Arsenal on a bad day.
Absolutely.
We played in a system designed to maximise Arsenal's difficulty, they're closing them down fairly robust fashion, and it's a system that has done well against Arsenal in previous years, but Arsenal also played very badly. In the other games against the top teams, United just haven't performed. So, there's absolutely smashed by City, very poor quality game against Chelsea at home, lost to Liverpool, lost to Spurs now. Of course, this is a Spurs side that have just been smashed 6-5 by City and Liverpool. So it's a very, very poor record against the top sides at the moment. And we said, a month or 6 weeks ago that December was going to be really important because we were playing a lot of sides below United in the table. Hey-ho, got a lot of points against teams that were down the table. I don't think we actually played anyone above 13th, did we? And so you'd kind of expect that. Suddenly play a decent side who are prepared to attack United and be brave about it, and the side struggles again. And I've got to say, 7th is not, at the moment, in terms of how United have played this season, 7th is about right. Yeah, the table isn't lying there. We've not been terribly unlucky. The gods have not been against us, and referees aren't cheating us out of points. I'm not having any of those as an excuse. I think 34 points out of 20 games is about par for how United have performed this season. And that equates to less than 70 points for the season as a whole if we carry on like this. And that includes the 12-match unbeaten run, right? Unless there's something dramatic happens, United are not favourites to take 4th place at the moment. And that doesn't look good at all. 11 points behind Arsenal. A couple of games ago we were thinking, it's down to 5 at one stage and then 8. Maybe a title run was in the offing, but I don't think so. I think, especially with the way Manchester City are playing at the moment, that City are favourites for the title. United are a long way off that. It would take a significant improvement in performance and a couple of teams to fail at the top at the same time, which rarely happens. And then to make 4th, it's still going to have to be a good second half of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a question from @McKee_Mark, Van Persie's beard on Twitter. Well, I think this is an interesting question, kind of relevant to the discussion at this point. And it's whose fault is it, our failings this season? Is it Moyes? Is it the players? Is it Glazers? Is it all of them? And I guess I think I would want to add, is it somewhat Fergie's fault as well?
Right, yeah. I think a part of all of it, one, Ferguson left a squad that wasn't the strongest. We knew that anyway, and we repeatedly talked last season that Ferguson had managed to squeeze more out of that squad than perhaps anyone else could. We'd sort of half-jokingly said if he'd taken the Arsenal side of last season, the one that finished 4th, he might have won the title with it. That's the force majeure that is Ferguson. Maybe, because he managed to take what is the 7th best side this season and win the title with them last season. That might be a commentary on David Moyes, who of course is the major change in Moyes and Moyes' coaches. Were a significant amount of disruption when we talked about Moyes being the continuity candidate, because he certainly wasn't the CV candidate. This is not the guy with the best record anywhere. He's never won anything. He's taken a mid-ranked club and he kept them mid-ranked for 10 years. So he wasn't the natural choice in terms of having won trophies. He was the continuity candidate, but unfortunately the only continuity that he allowed was his Scottishness. And then it's the Glazers' fault for not investing in the sides. £27 million spent on Fellaini. But, I think everyone recognises that was way too much to spend on Fellaini. He wasn't a £27 million player. He's a squad player at best for United. And so effectively we got a side that in many regards is ageing. Lost a player in Paul Scholes, albeit he didn't play much last season, but Vidic and Ferdinand have definitely gone backwards this season. So we've got a squad that wasn't the best and has degraded and wasn't improved over the summer, and so everyone takes a share of the blame.
And then I think that the players take some share of responsibility because they're professionals and they're not performing to the standards which they're capable of. But really, when that happens, of course, there's a question of personal responsibility. But then there is also a question of management, this ongoing rumbling about training. It's clearly not the same level of kind of contented dressing room that it was when we were winning everything in sight. The leaks coming out of it, Rio saying in his little video diary that it was turning him to a madman, not knowing whether he was playing or not. These are things that just wouldn't have happened. And some of that's the player's responsibility for not indulging in those types of behaviours, but the other is the management and the management team. Moyes is not working at United. It's too soon to say whether he will work at United, but he's not working now. He's not getting the team to play as he wants them to play. He's trying to enforce a system on players that are too good for the system he's trying to enforce on them and not good enough at the things they need to be good at for the system to work. I mean, to take it down to its most basic level, a huge part of Moyes' attacking philosophy is based on crossing, and we've barely got a player who can cross the ball in the United squad.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately that's translated itself into lumping it, or to give it its technical term, crosses from wide, deep areas, which is basically hit and hope, because the percentage of success with that type of ball is very small. You're lumping it in the box and hoping your big man will knock it in. Except United don't have a big man. We almost might as well play Fellaini up front if we're going to play with that kind of system, because if you're going to play hit and hope, you might as well have a big man in there. I have to say, at times it's a bit agricultural the way United have played. Now, we're not a hoofball side, but we're definitely a long, long way from some kind of tiki-taka prettiness, and I think a long, long way from the swashbuckling style of United in the late 90s, early 2000s. And of course, United transitioned into a slightly more conservative type team, possession-based team under Ferguson in the later years, but it still was a possession-based team. This team does not love the ball, even when we have more possession, a lot of it is not used in a very good fashion, right? A lot of sideways balls, and that tells me that there isn't enough movement up front, and then a lot of hopeful balls from wide areas, which isn't causing any damage at all.
There's a couple of interesting things back from that Spurs game. First of all, there's a really unpleasant thing to talk about, which is the crowd in the Stretford end chanting, "We all hate Jews." I was like, really unfortunate, and then somebody tried to stop them and was kind of just roundly abused and told that wasn't racist and all this stuff. And there's obviously, I don't particularly want to get into the Quinnell stuff unless you do, Ed, but it's very upsetting, the level of acceptable anti-Semitism. I mean, even people playing FIFA don't think twice about calling that thing that some people call it a sweaty goal, but loads of people call it a Jew goal. I'm sure that's completely unconscious and there's no hatred intended, but you're basically using hate speak if you do that, but anyway, so that's really upsetting, and nasty chants about Adebayor as well, and just leave it out, leave it out, stop it. I'm sure probably not too many people that are regular listeners to this podcast do stuff like that anyway, because they'd been sick of us years ago if they were, but
Yes, well, after our complaint about whether you can say Christmas or not last week, I had a bunch of people attempting to start a right versus left American politics debate, which I'm always happy to do, I have to say. Spent Christmas and New Year in the States. I spent quite a bit of time there. But look, I don't think we can avoid this as a topic of conversation, I'm afraid, just because it's important at the moment. So, I think some of the chanting from the Stretford end was unacceptable, and I think it's important to say that because we've been very critical of other fans. I don't think the chants about Adebayor are acceptable at all. Why is this funny? It's not. Why do we think we're being clever? We're not being. In fact, United fans, as we've praised them many times on this show, need to be the class of United fans that we really want. Especially if we're going to try and take a high horse, and United fans are very wont to do that. And then the chants about Tottenham and their religious affiliations is unacceptable as well. And I've been at Old Trafford with hissing sounds. Not very often, but I've definitely heard it, and I don't like that either. I don't think that's acceptable. And then to segue into the Quinnell debate, I don't think we can avoid this one. People are accusing me of being anti-Manchester City because I commented on Nasri on Twitter. It's really nothing about the club. I'm afraid this gesture is created by a comic. I use this term in a very loose way. Of course, Dedune Mbala, who is basically a right-wing anti-Semite. He's been very clear. It doesn't take a lot of research to work this one out, so I'm going to let everyone else do that on their own. But he has said things of the nature of, isn't it a pity the gas chambers don't exist anymore? He's a right-wing zealot who believes that there is some kind of Zionist Jewish cabal running the world. And when they talk about anti-establishment gestures, what they really mean is anti-Jewish. And, I think we need to be really clear about that. I have no religious affiliation. So I feel quite comfortable talking about that. Sometimes when we've talked about race on this show, I'm a white middle-class guy, basically, and it feels somewhat hypocritical talking about racism when we don't suffer it. And I have no religious affiliation here, but I don't think this is acceptable at all. It's quite obvious what this is about. Maybe Nicolas Anelka and Sami Nasri are too stupid to understand what they're doing. Maybe they're just following a trend, but I don't think they'd be so stupid if they just do a little bit of basic internet research and work out why people are doing this in front of synagogues, Jewish museums, at Auschwitz, for God's sake. This is not about some kind of anti-establishment movement. This is an anti-Semitic movement, and we need to cut it out. And I'm hoping that Nicolas Anelka gets a very long ban. There is a precedent here. Suarez claimed that he didn't know what he did was racist, but I don't care whether Nicolas Anelka thinks this is right or wrong. It's wrong, and he should be punished accordingly.
Yeah, I agree with all that. It's a difficult subject for my family, the whole subject, and it's very scary. The rise of anti-Semitism, say rise, never really goes anywhere. Anti-Semitism, much like racism, never goes anywhere. We live in a world riven by divisions, and it's very sad that that's the case, but it clearly is. And the Anelka thing was incredibly upsetting to see it happen. And of course, I'm not well educated about what's going on in French politics, and so most of what I know about this I know since it happened, and retrospectively it's such a horrific thing to associate yourself with. And to say it was just a gesture of support for my friend, well, if
it should get some different friends. I think
if my friend was arrested for murder because he had done it, I wouldn't be doing public gestures of support for him, So anyway,
yeah. So look, I don't think we actually need to debate whether this is right or wrong. It's wrong, and those people suggesting otherwise they're just being dumb, really. You're either supporting this as an anti-Semitic gesture, or you're too stupid to work out what's actually being done here. Either way, I don't think we need to brook a debate about this one. Unfortunately, West Brom have done a Liverpool here and come out in strong support of their player. Although, quickly afterwards, Anelka said he'd never do it again. It was one of those pathetic sorries, which was... I didn't realise this was wrong. I don't think it was wrong, but if anyone was offended, really sorry, mate. Not good enough. Really not good enough at all. And Sami and Nasri went one step further and attempted to justify himself. Look, and I know wealth and status and money doesn't equate to establishment, although in a capitalist society you might say it does. But, Sami and Nasri, who owns £8 million a year, lives in a massive mansion in Alderley Edge, doesn't get to talk about the establishment and what's wrong with it, I'm afraid. And so I don't buy that at all. I think he's probably just too stupid to know what he's doing, but doesn't make it any better.
Oh, right. Okay. Let's move on to something that might be more cheerful, although there's a slightly unfortunate aspect to all this too. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, the heir apparent to David Moyes. Don't know if anyone else thinks this. I've been fairly convinced that he would be a better choice than David for quite some time. But anyway, he's
got to question his decision-making skills now, though, haven't you?
Exactly. So lots of defence along the lines of, he's in a no-lose situation, because if it goes well, he'll be praised, and if it goes badly, everyone will blame the crazy owner. And I think, well, I'm not sure you can really have that, because it's not like he went into the situation not knowing exactly what was going on. He said in his press conference yesterday, I'm going into this situation with my eyes open. It was fairly clearly a coded, not very coded message. But man, the cut of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's jib is absolutely world class. Because I was really a bit like, what are you doing, Ole? Are you participating in this kind of horrific farce that is Cardiff City and their ownership? 2 minutes of listening to him talk about it, and I'm like, all right, fair enough. Go on, you could do it. You'll do a good job, lad.
Well, look, I'm sure he will do a good job. I think he's a very intelligent guy, and he says all the right things. He's everyone in Norway says, yes, he's still a quiet guy as a manager, but he's very firm with what he wants, and he's very clear with the players, and you listen to the Mulder players talking about him, and they're obviously in awe of him. And as a manager, not just because of his status in world football and as a Manchester United legend, But, I think he will do a good job. He's throwing himself into a very difficult situation. He turned down previous jobs in England because they were too difficult. So he turned down Aston Villa, presumably because he knew he wouldn't get any money. So Lambert took that one, and he's trying to do a job in very difficult circumstances at Aston Villa, reducing the wage budget. Solskjaer will have less of a wage problem. It looks like he's going to get substantial funds, both in the transfer market and in wages, to do a job there. But he has an owner who's a maverick who will potentially try and interfere and may not be very patient. He wants success immediately at Cardiff, and we know even if you throw some money at it, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to get the level of success that the owner wants. And then there's the fact that the owner is very disassociated from the fans, and that's going to make it difficult for Ollie to play the politics there, because he's going to have to play both the fans and the owner at the same time. But he seems a very smart guy and maybe be able to do that. I have to say, I do question his decision making though, because it doesn't feel like this is the perfect job for him.
And maybe he just got tired of waiting for the perfect job, and this was enough. There was enough in the pros column of this one.
Yeah, and he wanted to move back to England, and he's at a club in Molde who he won 2 league championships with, a club that never won a league championship before. Difficult third season there, but they still won a cup. So perhaps he feels that he can achieve no more with that side. It's probably true. He can probably achieve no more. So moving back to England makes a lot of sense in terms of the career progression. He's got a Premier League job. I think that's good for him rather than taking something in the Championship, which is a difficult place to work. But he's not taken on the perfect job. He was never going to get a job at the top 4 because he's unproven. But he's taking on a job with an owner that is very difficult but very ambitious, so there's lots of opportunity there too.
So you described Vincent Tan as a maverick earlier, which I think is extraordinarily kind as a description.
I think I might have even described him as a nutter on the previous show. So, yeah. And in fact, I said before Ollie had taken the job on Twitter that if Ollie takes the job, he'll be as big a nutter as the owner. So we'll see.
Rankcast listener Flat Cat Sam, we swap emails about Ollie occasionally, and he says no, it's perfect training ground for him to learn how to deal with terrible owners before taking over the job. So yeah, he's going to get good at playing politics between the fans and the bad owners that are unpopular with the fans.
Well, yeah, I didn't know you had a pen pal there, Paul. You're swapping love letters with the fans.
No, just love. If they're love letters about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So, I think that's completely acceptable.
All right.
One of my genuine sporting heroes, Ollie, is. Talking of the listeners, should we do a couple of questions?
Let's do so.
At the _Broomhead, winner of the famous Bebe 7 shirt, says, is it okay to actually enjoy us being rubbish? I was thinking about this. I was thinking there's something sort of fun about us being like a normal team again, but it's just a bit, what I don't really like is the sort of style of the rubbishness. If we were sort of glorious failures, that would be, I guess we were playing like a 1-0-9 the other day against Spurs by the end of the game, but there's something just slightly inglorious about the amount of hoofball we're playing that makes me unable to enjoy it.
Being a bit of a cynic by nature. Cynic, not negative. Those of you that do not know the difference between this. Being a bit of a cynic, I can kind of have some gallows humour about what's happening at United, and I've never found it that troubling to have a kind of honest, objective viewpoint about football anyway. I'm passionate about the club, but I think it's okay to step back and say we're not very good when we're not very good, or we're brilliant when we're brilliant. So there's that bit. I don't think I enjoy United playing badly, definitely not. And, it's really hard to enjoy what is happening to the club, because all of it seems very negative at the moment. In time, maybe we'll be wrong about this period, because there's certainly been other times in recent memory that felt very negative too. 2002 to 2005 period, for example, felt particularly bad. But this does feel very bad. The football that's being played is very poor, of very poor quality, and the results aren't coming either, and it's hard to warm to the manager as well. So, all of those things kind of are in the negative column, I think.
The thing is, 2002 and 2005 is kind of a perfect analogy, really, because the football's kind of negative, is not particularly high quality, and it's a bit hard to warm to the manager, because it certainly was at that period of time. And then there's the same ray of hope, like young Ronaldo was the ray of hope through that period, and now Adnan Januzaj is going to be scoring 60 goals a season in 3 years' time, and that'll be, and hopefully he won't leave to go to Real Madrid immediately afterwards. But talking of young players, Aid Fletcher says, of the young lads who have left in the not too distant past, who would you most like us to have kept out of Piqué, Pogba, Rossi and Ravel?
Well, right now, Pogba is the man that's really performing at the very highest level. I mean, he's been outstanding for Juve this season. Interesting to see United linked with Arturo Vidal again this week would be a fine purchase, although I think having kept Pogba would be a finer one. But so he's the man that's playing at the highest level of that lot. Of course, it's great to see Ravel back and playing in the big time. He's doing very well, and maybe he's still an outside shot for the World Cup. There's quite a lot of talk about him moving because of the clauses in his contract. His wages go up significantly if a bid comes in, his wages go up significantly. It's a bit of an odd clause, that one. I don't think I've seen that one too many times in other players' contracts. Piqué, of course, has been an outstanding servant for Barca in their outstanding side over the last 5 years.
Yeah, I think my answer would be Pogba, really. It's kind of the obvious one, isn't it? I mean, I've got a lot of love for the way Ravel plays. In a way, like, my answer would be Ravel, but there's a load of caveats to it, being like, if it had been the right thing for him to stay at the club, that would have been brilliant. That would have been a really positive outcome for what was a very difficult time. So I'd kind of wish it had all worked out for Ravel in a smoother way, more than I wish that Pogba had stayed for the kind of football side of it. But yeah, Pogba. Rossi, though, always nice to see Joe Red doing well, isn't it, Ed?
And he's scoring a lot of goals at Fiorentina now. He did very well at Villarreal for a few years, had a very bad injury, so spent about a year on the sidelines and then got a transfer to Fiorentina and is scoring bags and goals. He'll go to the World Cup with Italy for sure. Great to see him doing well. Anyway, we have 2 games coming up, and both cup games. It's nice to have a distraction from the difficulties of the Premier League, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Although the wins sort of feel a bit meaningless if you don't get points for them. I don't know, I've been completely de-romanticised from cup football.
Well, I think some good games coming up. Yeah, United at home to Swansea on Sunday in the FA Cup. Amazing if you look at United's draws over the year in the FA Cup, how many Premier League sides United play, especially in the early rounds.
Yeah, my friend at Joe Diego working out that we run over 100% above expectation at drawing a top flight side in the third round of the FA Cup.
There you go. Nice statistic, yeah. It's those evil bosses at the FA conspiring against us, of course.
The Fergie Association.
Yeah. So, where are the Gluminati when you really need them? Retired, unfortunately. So Swansea and this would be a nice game. I mean, Swansea clearly will play us off the park, but maybe plucky United will get a cup win, It's the magic of the cup. You never know what will happen on the day.
Yeah, Moyes' boys go in as underdogs against the... Swansea really not doing great, are they? They've definitely struggled a bit this season. And I mean, Laudrup's sort of changed the style a bit. Not quite as philosophically devoted to tiki-taka as they were a couple of seasons ago, but they do play some nice stuff. And actually, they gave City a sort of scare at the weekend in the game that Didier Hamann on Match of the Day was moved to comment that Yaya Toure was a liability for Manchester City.
Hey, we'll take that liability off your hands, no problem. Yes, I agree with you. Swansea have transitioned under Laudrup. I mean, they do still play good football, but they'll mix it up a little bit more than they used to. I don't think they certainly haven't gone from playing nice football to hoofing it or anything like that.
No, they've not done a United.
No, yes, we can just call it a United. But they've been conceding too many goals, and that's a real problem for them. And they've conceded quite a few goals in big games as well. And part of the reason they've transitioned is they brought Boney in, who hasn't scored the goals that they would have liked either. He's a speed merchant. He likes the ball in front of him. He's powerful. I think he could do really well in the Premier League. He just hasn't quite done it yet. And Mitchell's been in and out because he's been injured.
Just on the Boney point, he scored 2 goals in his last game, so it's maybe starting to happen for him. But yeah, I mean, I think we'll win this game. I think Danny Welbeck will score. Can you believe that that's my prediction, Ed? It's just unbelievable, isn't it?
Well, you've been predicting that even when he got 1 goal all the season last year. Right now, he's got, 4 in 5 in the last 6 games? He's scoring for fun, he's old Danny, which is that's some really nice goals. We didn't comment on it earlier, but the goal scored against Spurs was an absolute peach. Beautiful ball from Januzaj. I mean, just showing his all-round. I mean, there's nothing this kid can't do. And another lovely dinked finish from Welbeck.
I mean, I have to say that, all joking aside, the absolute bright spark of this season has been seeing Januzaj and Welbeck both playing so well, because they work fantastically well together. They're both products of the youth team. And it's that whole thing of the Barcelona system bringing through players that can play together because they've played in a system for many years. And, that Meulenstein, Joyce, since they really have, and Solskjaer, they've put in place a system, right? You know, the United's youth team has produced really technically adept players and they work well together. Even Tom Cleverley, not performing exactly great by any stretch of the imagination, but he looks better when interchanging with Welbeck and Januzaj.
Well, yes, I mean, I wouldn't say Welbeck and Januzaj have really grown up together, but I mean, there's certainly more of a...
But through the
there's
system.
more of a coherent system at United's academy and under-21 sides than there is in the first team, that's for sure. And that's nothing to do with results per se, it's just that because there is some continuity at those levels as well. So, look, I don't think it'll necessarily be the toughest game United will face this season, although I expect Moyes will rotate, so we could see quite a few changes for this game and the Sunderland Capital One Cup game coming up. For Swansea, well, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because, you know, in theory, they're kind of flirting with relegation. They're not that many points above the relegation zone. They're underperforming against their performance of last season. So they desperately need some points. Laudrup's beginning to feel like he's under a little bit of pressure. Not loads, you know. They're not right in the relegation zone yet, but they do need Premier League points. So the Cup is a distraction and perhaps not in a good way for them. Having said that, you know, the FA Cup is one of those tournaments that Swansea can go after because a lot of the big teams will rest players in the early rounds. And so it's an opportunity. You know, look, Wigan won it last season. Why couldn't Swansea? It's an opportunity for silverware. What I guess I'm saying is it's hard to call this one. I think United will make quite a few changes. Swansea might make a few, although I think it's in their interest to perhaps make less. And I think they'll give United a good game. They do keep the ball well, even if they have changed their style a little bit. And, you know, it's a big day out for what I assume will be a lot of away fans.
Moyes has some interesting decisions in terms of priorities. I mean, we play Swansea again next weekend, so weird thing where 2 home games in a row against the same side. But in between that, we go to Sunderland for, you know, the first leg of a semi-final. Moyes' season definitely looks better if there's silverware in it. And
Most
so
certainly.
You wonder whether he's going to actually... I mean, this is really ignoble, isn't it, for United, but prioritise the League Cup.
Oh, Christ. The things really are getting bad. Well, look, the funny thing is, you know, we can make fun of that, but actually Ferguson, when United got to the League Cup, played pretty strong sides in the semi-final. I mean, remember those 2 games against Manchester City a few years back, so it wouldn't be so bad for United to put out a strong side on Wednesday and make sure we get a lead or something approaching it at Sunderland. That wouldn't be bad at all. I mean, given that Sunderland are absolutely abysmal at the moment, bottom of the league, looking like relegation is an absolute certainty, the League Cup is certainly not important for them. So they may well rest players because the league is definitely the most important thing for Sunderland. And, you know, this is a good opportunity for United to go out there and put themselves a final, which could well be against Manchester City, of course. You know, this is going to make a massive difference in the narrative of David Moyes' season. You know, he can't win the Capital One Cup and then fail to qualify for the Champions League and call it a good season. Not by any means, right? But if United qualify for the Champions League, assuming that we're saying that the Premier League is out of sight now, and then win the Capital One Cup and put in a decent performance in Europe, then the narrative changes quite a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you had to predict which of these 2 games is more likely to see an appearance from Alex Butner, you'd say the FA Cup third round. Yeah.
I think he'll definitely play on Sunday. I'm sure he might even play in both of them, given that Everett probably needs a rest. I mean, it's worth, you know, using him in the right way, isn't it, given his age and the way that they use the fullbacks at United this season.
The way Everett is being used this season is mostly stand near the opposition box on the left-hand side.
Well, right, yeah. Auxiliary winger, isn't he? As for the Sunderland game, you know, they're playing just abysmal football. I know they went to Everton and won, which was a bit of a surprise given that Everton are playing some good football. But the rest of it from Sunderland is terrible. A dire performance against Aston Villa at the weekend, against a dire team, of course. Just nothing is going right. They don't score any goals. They concede way too many. They're a tactical mess, even with Poyet there now. I'm sure they're going to get relegated. You know, 14 points. Past the halfway stage of the season, almost certainly down. You know, it's almost so bad that they should just start planning for next season now, trying to work out who they can offload, who they need for a shot at the Championship. So, I think given all the priorities, I think they have to put a fight up in the Premier League, so they'll probably make some changes at the weekend. Midweek, and it's a good chance for United.
I mean, I think it's slightly different. The League Cup semi-final to kind of rest players for the Premier League, because there's a maximum of 3 games left and it's all over by February, right? The final's in Feb. So you've got all of March, April and May to focus on the Premier League. It's not like the FA Cup later stages, which really mix up the run-in if you're still involved. So I don't know how many. I think Sunderland will be a pretty strong side. They're not very good. they're terrible, but I think they'll put out a fairly strong lineup because, you know, for Gus Poyet, he'll want the season not to be a disaster, and a trip to Wembley will offset the pain of relegation. Funny how much that happens recently, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, like Sunderland, their big players have to play. So, or have to play well for them to have a chance against United. And Fletcher's just not scoring. I mean, he was had a couple of very good seasons, didn't he? Altidore, forget it. He's never been very good. Anyway, Borini on loan from Liverpool, not doing well. Had a very strange incident where they rushed him off to hospital the other week. I mean, Larson, I assume, will play. He was on the bench at the weekend against Aston Villa. You know, he can cause damage from set pieces. The rest of it's terrible. I mean, Wes Brown is having a good season when he's not suspended, and he's showing what a good player he is when he's fit and not getting red cards, of which there have been a few, some more unlucky than others. I don't believe O'Shea's fit at the moment, is he? And another red, Bardsley is played, but this is in a back four that is not playing very well.
No, Fletcher 2-2. So your run on strikers who are not scoring enough this season is also 2 for 2 of people who have just started scoring. But you're right, it's taken him so long to get going, hasn't it? And he looks. It's weird. Strikers are weird, man. Christian Benteke's completely given up scoring goals when he couldn't stop before.
Yes, but he doesn't have a new contract to negotiate now.
Maybe that's it. All right, we need to finish, right? So, predictions, Ed?
I think United are going to win twice. There you go.
Yeah, me too.
And after the disappointment of Tottenham, is disappointment the right word? The abject failure against Tottenham and the disappointing performance against Norwich, although the result was good, I think United will win. So let's call it a cup cracker and say United will win 3-2 against Swansea and sneak a 1-0 win away at Sunderland.
All right, I'm not sure we've got 3 goals in us, but I'm going to go for a 2-1-0 wins on the bounce, grinding it out, Moyesy style.
Very nice, very nice. Well, let's hope so. Certainly need a more positive week than the past week, and the distraction of the cup is good, I guess, before the real thing starts against Swansea again next weekend.
Absolutely, and we'll see you before that. If you've enjoyed the show, please let us know. You can get me on Twitter at UTDRantcast. You can get Ed at United Rant. Get us both on facebook.com/United Rant and leave a comment on the show page at unitedrant.co.uk. And what would be extremely helpful is if you could rate us and review us on iTunes. It just takes a couple of minutes, and if 50 people listening to this were to do that this week, we'd shoot up the iTunes charts, which is awesome. So if you would be so kind as to take the time out to do that, that'd be much appreciated.
Right, and maybe the show's slogan on our show homepage of the planet's favourite Manchester United podcast will actually come true if you do that.
Yes, maybe so. That was a bit like we might need to change that, Ed. I'm not sure if it's mathematically accurate or not.
Well, I don't know. Do you know the data? No. So
no,
might
no,
be.
It could be true. The Rantcast, potentially the planet's favourite Manchester United podcast.
All right. Well, in the meantime, have a very good week. Let's hope there's 2 good performances against Swansea and Sunderland, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.